The following programming is sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group. Entrepreneur, founder, author, and financial advisor Mark Bernstein helps high-performing business owners turn their visions into reality. Through his innovative work and the Forward Focus Forums, Mark connects entrepreneurs to resources that fuel their success. Founders Forum is a radio show and podcast where entrepreneurs share their journeys, revealing the lessons they've learned and the stories behind their success. Join Mark and his guests for a mix of inspiration, valuable insights, and a little fun. Now, let's dive in.
Good morning, America. How are you today? This is Mark Bernstein. This is Founders Forum, and we're working here out of Southwest Florida at the radio station of WXKB. We're here with Roger Marley this morning, our producer-engineer, who I don't always say his name, but we really appreciate his efforts. And I have in the studio this morning Arnie, who I'll officially introduce in a minute, and David Calderwood, who I'm doing that. We like to keep it real, so we had some things. So David's name is Calderwood, which is how I would always have said it, and I did. But then all of a sudden I thought, well, maybe in New Zealand where he's from they say Calderwood. So we had the rare edit to our last show that we did with David. So just keeping it real here, guys. So anyway, we're going to get right into it. I have a quote to start the day, and I had them both in the studio before for David's show, and this seemed like a great quote, and it's attributed to Dan Sullivan. I'm sure he's not the only one that ever said something, but it's a version I know of other things. But he said, all progress starts by telling the truth. So Arnie, as your today's guest, I'll ask you first what that means to you.
The truth, I think, is what's real, what's authentic. That truth is truth. I don't know how else to describe it.
That's good, David. What's your take on it?
Ooh, the truth. The truth is what people want it to be in a lot of cases, and it's not necessarily. There's no good or bad. It's just what it is.
So you raised my question is like, how do you tell the truth these days? I mean, it's always been the case, but with social media, with the proliferation of social media and AI and all these other things, it's really getting harder and harder to distinguish. I mean, to me, facts are either true or they're not true. Opinions, of course, are subject to other things, but there are certain basic things that are true or not true. But we're in the world now, it's been quoted as alternative facts and facts that fit the situation that may be different than what we might consider to be the real truth. How do you determine that? We don't have to answer this. I don't think there is an answer. Unless anyone has a brilliant idea.
Well, you mentioned AI, and I just wanted to touch on that because I was just reading an article last night about AI being used in advertising, and they're already signing people up for their likeness, creating multiple images of them, and giving them like a 2-year contract where they can use their image and create whatever ads they like for them. Wow. And you cannot tell them apart from regular images or videos.
Interesting.
And
so it begins, right? So I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about that. As promised, I will now introduce our guest today, Arnie Eastburn, who is co-founder and president and CEO of Water4Life Mozambique, Inc. That is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing clean, safe drinking water to communities in Mozambique. With over 376 wells drilled across the Zambezia province, his efforts have improved the lives of more than 451,000 people. Arnie's mission, fueled by his entrepreneurial background and passion for humanitarian work, has transformed communities by combating water scarcity and improving public health. He is committed to creating a sustainable, brighter future for Mozambique's most vulnerable populations. We're going to first hear about Arnie's entrepreneurial life, but when you hear the story of the founding of this organization, you'll be truly inspired, as I was when I first heard this story. But in the meantime, welcome, Arnie.
Thank you, Mark.
So you're an entrepreneur, even in your nonprofit. We've talked about this.
Yes.
You're an entrepreneur. And you're a founder, and you've founded companies along the way. And when we've talked about your childhood and how you grew up. And your father was an entrepreneur of sorts, right? That influenced you probably more in later life than early life. But tell us about that and kind of how your journey began.
Well, if you going back to my father, he was a church planting pastor and a plumber. So that's how I grew up as a preacher's kid. And so you have to be pretty creative being a preacher's kid, trying to figure out how to navigate. You said truth a minute ago. It's all about truth.
Well, there's that part of it. But I was thinking about the church planting pastor part. Yeah. He basically went around starting churches.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
While I'm sure he didn't get paid for it, well, maybe he did. I don't know.
A little
bit, right? but he, that's an entrepreneurial activity.
Yes.
Right. So
yeah.
All right. So you went to school,
and
then what happened? Like, how did you first find entrepreneurship?
Well, I would have to back up to my childhood about when I found entrepreneur and when I wasn't able to spell it or even pronunciate it.
Right.
But when I wanted my first
who
bicycle.
Even knew that word existed? Right.
Who knew?
Right.
But in the 6th grade, I wanted a bicycle. I hadn't had one. And so my dad told me if I wanted one, he couldn't pay for it, that I'd have to get a job. So I went and got a paper route and went to the Western Auto Store and got a bicycle, and they allowed me to make $2.75 a week payment for my bicycle.
Wow.
So I didn't know I was
at 6 years old.
Yeah, let's get at it. I mean, I had a problem and I had a solution.
I love it. That's great. So how did it next manifest yourself in your life? I'm not going to limit it to times of your life. I'm going to just ask you, how did that come about next?
Well, probably I've always had, I guess I wouldn't make a very good employee, so I've always had to create something for myself. But I got married 2 weeks after I graduated from high school to my sweetheart that I started dating when I was a sophomore and she was a senior. And I was...
Not to reveal age, but how many years are you two together today?
Be 54 years in June.
Nice. That's a great story.
So I was ready to get up and get going and wanted to get on with life. Wasn't sure where I was going. The only real goal I had was I wasn't going to be poor. And that was my driving factor.
And what was your first... And then you went to high school and college?
Mm-hmm.
College. Where'd you go to college?
Purdue.
And were you working? Did you have any entrepreneurial type activities while at Purdue or afterwards?
Yes. During that was in the insurance business. Started out with selling life and health and property and casualty. And so that's how I had a wife and 2 children at the time. So had to work, had to make money and trying to get on with it.
Yep. And I know you had some success in that business, correct?
Yes.
And who were you working for? We
started out with Indiana Farm Bureau.
Right.
So I was a captive agent at that point.
And some things changed along the way that had you recreate yourself in that business, right?
Yeah. After about 3 years, had a group of men come to me and asked me to go to Georgia. We lived in Indianapolis or Kokomo, Indiana at that time, to start a new life insurance company and start out with a $4 million SEC registered stock issue. And so we were out hiring stock salesmen to get the $4 million and fund a new life insurance company. That sounded pretty easy.
Your job went from selling life insurance to selling stock in a new company. And how old were you at this age?
24.
That's what I was thinking. Pretty fun. And how'd that work out?
Well, it's the fortunate part was I didn't have a lot to lose.
Right. That's the good news.
But we lost everything. We thought Georgia was going to be like Indiana, but
wow. So that didn't quite happen.
No.
So there's a lot of failures on the way to success, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what happened next?
Well, I ended
Had to
up
make some money, had kids.
had to make some money, and I was through with sales. I was tired of dealing with the public, so we bought a small farm in Missouri and started doing row crop and raising hogs. And to have cash flow, I started selling insurance again to fund my habit of wanting to get away from public. Right. But that didn't happen. I had to stay with the public.
Okay.
I mean, we did all of it, but yeah.
And from there, you created another company, I believe.
Yes, that was when we got into the professional employer business, known back then as employee leasing. Right. And so we bought territory from a company down here in Florida, actually, and started selling for it. And then after a couple of years, got it all figured out, went back home to Indiana and started our own professional employer organization called Employee Concepts.
Great. And what was different about that than the other companies out there? Because I know you had some unique things about that.
Well, basically coming from the insurance industry and where you tried to get a group of people, a small company, and take them to try to get health insurance and workers' comp and all of that. We just reversed that and went out and did co-employership with companies, and we took on the human resource aspects, if you will, and we became co-employers, and then that allowed us to go and buy health insurance and workers' comp and all, and bring all of that big corporate benefit packages and all to the small employer.
And prior to that, you had sold at least one of your, I think your insurance selling business you sold. Correct?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah.
And I say that because I know there was another exit after this company. So so I know you had some challenges with the employee, called employee leasing company. What kind of challenges did you have that the hills along the way to success?
Well, the whole, of course, all of us as entrepreneurs getting started is telling people what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And then you got to get a few to give you a shot at it to prove that you can actually do it and succeed. And but it was always back to having in-house employees to handle all of the processing, payrolls, and all those things. But we had to navigate a lot of insurance laws with different states, and we ended up with employees in 9 different states. So we had some challenges along that line with the benefits and with the workers' comp.
What was the name of that company, Arnie?
That was Employee Concepts.
Oh, right.
Based in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Yep. And we're almost at the break, so I'm going to ask you more about what happened to that after the break. What strengths did you develop to handle the challenges of the different employees and the management of the different states, and what kind of strengths did you develop? What did you learn along the way, I guess is my question, in terms of...
Don't give up.
Yeah. Just keep going. Yeah.
Keep paddling.
And you did that, and you did it to what level of success? Pretty successful company,
yes.
right?
Yeah, we built a great company, and 10 years later, we sold it, and that's what we did. Yeah.
So to measure that success, you like how many employees did you have for Employee Concepts? Your own employees at that point?
We had about you're saying in-house or
in-house? Yeah.
In-house, we had 12
employees.
12 employees.
But the employees that you leased out, so to speak, was a big number, I know. About
1,200 when we sold, and then through the merging, we ended up with 25,000.
Right. When you sold.
Yes.
Which meant that you continued to work for the company.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our guest today, Arnie Eastburn.
Imagine needing to bathe with just 3 cups of water. That's daily life in parts of Mozambique, where women walk miles every single day just to collect water, not for luxury, just to survive. Girls miss school, some are attacked on the journey, all because they need water. It's hard to imagine how precious water really is until you see the struggle. But heartbreak turned into hope, where people like you helped drill wells, Today, Water4Life Mozambique has brought clean, safe water to over 400,000 people, but thousands more are still waiting. You can change that right now. Go to water4lifemozambique.org and help drill the next village well, because clean water doesn't just quench thirst, it saves lives. Water4lifemozambique.org. One well, one village, a world of difference.
Okay, welcome back to Founders Forum. So today we're talking to Arnie Eastburn, and as I mentioned before, he is founder of Water4Life Mozambique, and we really did a quick overview of his entrepreneurial career, and he had significant successes. So Arnie, you sold that company, and then what happened?
Well, I went on a mission trip. Yep. To Africa.
Yep. And what was the purpose of that mission, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I went with a group of people over to speak at a Bible college in Shai, Mozambique, and the Lord just got a hold of my heart there, and all I'd ever wanted to do all my life was build companies, start something new. And first time in my life, I really didn't care about building another business. I just felt like I had to do something for the people of Mozambique.
But in fact, you did build something. You built an organization. You didn't do it for profit, but you did it as a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And what I know your story is, it turned out a little like building your entrepreneurial career in terms of how you did that. So what did you discover on that trip that motivated you to want to build what you were about to build?
Well, that trip, the main thing was just understanding that everything had changed. All my drive and desires had changed. And I guess you could say simply, I went from thinking about me to thinking about others for a change.
Right. Wasn't about money anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't about money. And so I went over and started volunteering and doing traveling with a Jesus film team and going into remote villages and sleeping in tents and carrying a gas-powered generator and showing a video of the movie of Jesus. And that's what we started doing. And then I took men over and women and volunteered to build churches in villages, and took pastors over to speak in the Bible school, and did that for about 10 years. And then when I
just want to point out, I'm sorry, I just want to point out, I know early in life you had not that much interest in religion, and you weren't going to be a pastor, and you weren't going to be a plumber, but you in fact ended up being a pastor maker of churches again, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So, so that's how you originally started out.
Yes.
So how did it get from that to water?
Well, basically, as we were doing all those things, I asked the pastors we were working with, church planting pastors up in the northern part of Mozambique, what's your greatest need? And they all said water. Said our churches are growing, people are coming to know Jesus, but they're still dying from drinking dirty water. And that's when I knew that's what I needed to do, is provide clean, safe drinking water.
And by the way, as I've told you, we don't usually do religion on the show.
Yeah.
But I'm so inspired by your story that I felt like we had to do this one. And so for me, it's ultimately about, well, we actually talked about, we've talked a little bit about we started this show by talking about the truth, what the truth is.
Yeah.
Well, the truth in this situation was, and I know what's really moved you, and you, for those that can't tell, you have tears in your eyes now, and I'm getting them. And because what you learned about the people there and why they needed the water is the part that really hit me.
Yes.
And so talk about that a little bit.
Well, you're talking about a country, and keep in mind, 60% of the population on the African continent doesn't have access to clean drinking water. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out the need, which I'm not. But from the standpoint of the little girls, especially, it's the girls and the mothers in that culture, they are the ones responsible for collecting the water. And you got little girls walking 2 miles, 5 miles on paths by themselves and going to water holes to collect water and then carrying that back home. That's about 50 pounds of water, and that really puts them at risk both to men as predators and animals that are predators. So it really, it saves, they risk their lives just carrying water every day.
And when you hear those stories, like for me, the first thing that popped in my mind is my daughter as a teenager, and if she had to do that and what the risks were and the potential damage that could be done. And so what happened was, when you recognized this problem, we didn't mention that you would work, part-time helping your dad in the plumbing business as well, right? So not only were you now working in the pastoring business, but now you had to teach what you knew about plumbing to the pastors, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
That you had brought on as pastors.
Yes.
And so what did you do with what? How did that work? What did you do? You started digging, I guess, right?
Well, what we did, we knew that there was water there. It wasn't because you had a lot of hand dug wells, if you will, 25 feet deep, and they were hitting water. So we knew it wasn't an issue of getting water. It was a matter of keeping it safe, getting deep enough to where it didn't dry up in the dry season, that there was a constant flow and didn't get contaminated and all. So what we did is I gathered some people that had been with me to Mozambique and kind of fell in love with Mozambique, and we formed Water4Life Mozambique, and they funded all of our cost in order to purchase all the equipment needed. So we bought all of our equipment in Bangkok, Thailand, had it shipped into Mozambique. And then we took this group of church planting pastors that were up there in their villages and trained them how to drill wells with the equipment. And so we started drilling wells, and that's how we got started.
And how long ago was that?
That was in 2015 when we drilled our very first well. We formed in 2014, but gathering, doing donations and all. But we drilled our first well in September of 2015, and that was 386 wells ago now.
And almost 10 years ago.
Yes.
So and you don't say this, and I know I have to, but I know that you put your own money into this as well, and kind of started the whole thing off. So what kind of progress has been made over that time?
Well, we have 863 wells drilled, and that covers approximately 1,200 people per village, or per well, if you will. So that means we're just under 500,000 people now are having water. And the beautiful part of it is it's not a one and done. It's not like you drill a well and we donated 6,900 and have a well drilled. But that well, we stay focused in a central area to where we can help maintain those wells, so they're all continuing to work.
Gotcha.
The water keeps flowing.
Listen, I don't know if you can hear in the background, but Roger, our engineer, doesn't usually talk much, but he can't help but he's like, wow, he's blown away by this whole thing, as am I.
Thank you.
I mean, it really is amazing work. So we always ask about future vision on this show, and you chose again 3-year vision is what just an interesting aside is that I think most people pick 3-year vision, and I think there's a reason for that, and I like 3-year vision because that's 10 years today is with the rate of change in the world is almost impossible to imagine, and 1 year you're just still formulating what you're going to do, so 3 years seems to be a good number.
Yeah.
So if we're sitting here talking and it's now April of 2028, and you and I are talking, Arnie, what would have to happen in your life and also specifically for Water4Life Mozambique for you to feel that was a successful and fulfilling period of your life?
Well, you started out by saying truth. The truth is, if we just drill one more well and one more village has clean, safe water, and the little girls are able to go to school instead of carrying water, and the little children that die at the rate of 1 out of 5 under the age of 5 die every year. So 3 years from now, if we've saved 60, 70,000 kids from death, and we've had drilling 100 wells a year, that's what's important. It's like the starfish on the beach. It was important to that one.
Yeah. What kind? So I don't usually plug businesses or nonprofits specifically on the show, but this is a very inspiring one. And if you're listening to this podcast, you would have already heard a commercial that we donated for Water4Life Mozambique. But what can people do to help you is my question. How can they support your efforts if they're inspired as we are? From
donations. We're solely based upon donations, and it's individual donations. We're not searching government grants or that type of thing. So people donating dollars on our website can go there to Water4Life and Mozambique. And you can donate stocks, you can donate crypto, or you can donate hard cash. We take it all.
Without giving financial advice, IRAs are a good thing if you're retired,
Yes.
And appreciated property like stocks, as you mentioned.
That funds a lot of our wells, are people that donate their disbursements out of their IRAs every year.
And that would be Water4Life Mozambique is where you can find it, and the 4 is the number 4. So water
Yes.
number 4 Life Mozambique.
Yes.
Is how you can find it.
And Mozambique's hard to spell, so if you just went to w4lmoz.com, it'll take you right there.
w4moz.com. There you go. That's great.
Like I said, I'm a pretty simple guy, Mark.
And speaking of simple guys, I'm going to ask you one simple question. Your favorite book?
It'd have to be the Bible.
And why is that? I mean, I know it's the greatest stories ever told.
Yeah. Well, like I said, grew up in a pastor's home, and I couldn't wait to get out of the house and out of church. And for 30 years, I never went to church. And I started reading at the age of 49 after selling the companies and all, and started reading the book Mein Kampf. That was a book always heard so much about. And as I was reading that, after about 2 or 3 chapters, just the darkness of reading that. And then I just heard the dominant thought was, here I am.
Probably the darkest book ever written.
Yeah.
Or one of them.
Yeah. And that's the dominant thought was, here I am reading a book that Satan inspired when I haven't read the book that God inspired. And I put it down 3 times. I tried to read it, and that occurred. So then I said, okay, I'm a little slow, but I catch on, Mark. I just said, Lord, I'm going to read your book from start to finish before I read anything else. So that's what I did that year, and I've read it through every year for the last 24 years.
That's an inspirational story as well. Well, listen, again, I'm going to just say Water4Life Mozambique. Check it out. It's really amazing work that you're doing, and you're saving lives. And if anyone's listening and would like to support Arnie's efforts and the organization's efforts, please do. I want to thank you so much for telling your inspirational story here, David Calderwood. I want to thank you for being in the studio with us today. And thank you all for listening to Founders Forum, and we'll see you again next week.
We hope you enjoyed your time with Founders Forum and that you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WXKB 1039 HD2. Sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group.